And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Rabbi Iggy, Gurin, Malous, a renowned Talmud teacher, spiritual counselor, artist, and educator. He's an author, speaker, teacher, and contributor on subjects ranging from Talmud, Jewish text, spirituality, addiction, recovery, fatherhood, and LGBTQI plus issues. Today, he is the founding rabbi and CEO of Tshuva Center, a new long-term Jewish recovery community in New York City. He was formerly the director of spiritual counseling at Beit Tshuva in Los Angeles. It is my absolute privilege to welcome you. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here. And I got such a great slot today this year. Nice to see everybody. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for coming. I don't just say that in that sense in a pro forma, but like there's so many good choices these years, especially now everything on Zoom. So spending 55 minutes with me, it really is a great honor and a privilege for me. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for this lovely introduction, and thank you for JCC for hosting this amazing thing. I'm gonna we're gonna talk tonight as I promised about Talmud after dark, what the rabbis are trying to get away with, if you will. And there's a couple of things sort of like why I sort of chose this topic, and in general why I talk about this. And as a general rule, if you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in chat. I'll monitor it. If I can answer it through, I'll answer it through. So feel free, right? I really want this to be as much a collaboration discussion as possible, right? I'm a rabbi, so I can talk at you for way more than an hour, but I really prefer for us to sort of converse. So if you have questions or comments, please do. We'll look at some text together. I'm going to share the sheet with you in a second as a PDF. Don't be alarmed. There is like a million things on it. Mostly again because as a rabbi and as a Jew, I always worry that there's not enough, right? There's not enough food. There's not enough text on the page, right? If you present it anywhere, you know exactly what I mean. So so here we are. But I'm going to put it in the PDF in the chat right now. It won't let me. Is that a setting?
Okay, let me see how I can help here. Hold on.
Okay. All right. So I'll talk. I mean, I'll also project it. So so if we can sort of like we'll follow along. But so the reason why this is I chose this is a few things. Primarily. Because I find it really important for all of us to sort of look at these texts, look at sort of the Talmudic period, Talmudic rabbis, and really understand that sort of that we are all part of this thing called the human condition. And this human condition is really something that's been going on for 2,500 years and more, right? And I think one of the amazing things that sort of I got to sort of learn through this Talmudic study of mine is that the more I dive into these texts, the more I see the humanity in it, the more I'm able to see that they are people as well, and they are broken just like the rest of us. And because of that brokenness, that I can relate to them in ways that I can also relate to people around me. And as somebody who's working primarily around recovery and addiction recovery, and this idea of for us to relate to one another, not out of trying to judge or out of perfection, but really to sort of understand that we all have something that we carry with us, that we all have wounds, that we all have things that we are part of this human condition, the more we're able to accept all these parts within ourselves and within others. And the opposite of addiction, as Johann Hari puts it so well, the opposite of addiction is connection. And when I say addiction, I don't just mean addiction of just the drugs and alcohol as well, but I would say, as a general rule, all those things, all those maladjustments, those things that we do to soothe ourselves that sometimes we don't always feel we should, right? Sex, power, food, shopping, like all these different things. We all have to be, right, sort of like self-soothing, especially these days. And we have to sort of like kind of amalgamate the different parts of ourselves, that we think don't go together, or the different sort of voices in our heads that sort of keep telling us that sort of you're not you don't matter, you're not important, something's wrong with you, you're broken. So I want to show you how how broken they were, and have some fun in the process, and talk a little bit about sort of like how did they want to get away with it, and how can we be more compassionate to them and to others, and also talk a little bit about sex and have fun with it. So that's how we are. Did we figure it out, Allison, or?
So you want to put it in the chat? Is that what you want to do? You want to
Yeah,
just
I
share?
just want to put it in the chat. I mean, I'll share the screen as well, but I just wanted to put the PDF for people in the chat as well. But if we can.
Okay, start by sharing the screen, and I'm going to ask them how you put it in the chat, okay?
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. All right. Questions, comments before we start. Feel free to raise the hand feature, or just, if you want to use the hand feature under the sort of the reactions, and if you have a question, you can go on mic, you can mute yourself, comments like that as well. But if not, we can get it going. All right. So I'm going to share my screen and we can start, right? All right. So first text. It's also, by the way, if you want Sapphire, it's I can also give you the link to Sapphire if that's easier, but we can do that after. All right. So this is from right. This is from Eruvin, from Tractate Eruvin, right? Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said, "What is the meaning of that which is written? A loving hind in graceful row." Right? I think it's doe. I think it's a misprint, but like, right? Let her breast satisfy you all the times, and be you ravished always with her love. Why were matters of Torah compared to a hind? There is a right to tell you that just as with a hind, its womb is narrow and it is cherished by its mate each and every hour like the first hour, so too matters of Torah are cherished by those who study them each and every hour like the first hour. So this is a very nice and, if you will, a little sort of like I don't know, kind of polished translation of this, right? But if I were to translate this the Hebrew, for those of you who look at the Hebrew, right? That's the question. Why a Torah, the very Torah is, why is it like this dough, right? To tell you that how the womb, but I would say the vagina is narrow, right? And therefore it is pleasing to the person who has sex with her every time as if it was the first time. So are the words of Torah, that they are as pleasant, or those who learn them every hour and hour, as if it was the first time, as if it was a virgin, like a virgin touched for the very first time, to quote the great Madonna, right? So I don't know if you have reactions, comments, questions, right? I always sort of like let the text speak for itself a little bit before we sort of go into this sort of extrapolation of it. So again, if you have a comment or a question, feel free to raise your hand. I'm happy to go mic. What do you mean by hind? It's a type of deer, like a really young deer, like a young doe, I think, what will be very similar, right? So questions, comments? Yet. Okay, good. So here, and I chose to start with because I wanted to sort of to set the stage, right, in this particular moment, that for a lot of Torah scholars throughout generation, especially them when they're very young people, learning Torah, right, has an element of eroticism, of sex. The Torah scrolls, you have to open it, you have to carry it, it's a scroll, right? You have to put your hand, right, the reading hand on top of the Torah, right? There was always a very erotic endeavor, right? And here it just makes it very explicit. Now, a lot of these are young men, right? They're not home, right? So like, right, they're basically teenagers in yeshiva. So of course they think about sex all the time. But for them, this idea of studying Torah is the Torah being this sort of like mistress to reveal her secrets, to yield her secrets, right? And to enjoy it just like the first time. Every single Torah, right, starts and puts a really interesting underline and tone to what we're going to talk about. And that is that they look at Torah not just as just this holy thing that is separated from our corporal bodies, but really incorporating and looking at sex as something that's very, very important. Okay, and important to the study of Torah. Okay. Is it saying the Torah is as sweet as sex, or sex is as sweet as Torah? It's saying both, but it's saying, when I just said, it's saying that like a virgin time, like, right? Like the excitement of the first time for them, right? So yes, I don't know about my parents, but for me, sex got better when I wasn't a virgin. Partner. Yes, that's probably true. But if you are a young teenager in 2,500 years ago, the virgin part is very illustrative, right? So it's like a big draw, but we all agree, I think, right? So like the first time, perhaps not the best, right? You need a little more, I think, but the this sort of draw from it is at least what they're pointing out to, right? But agreed, Dale. So, all right. Now, I want to show you, right, sort of like, we're going to go more. So like, for example, right, to talk about this a little bit, is this text. Sorry, let me stop this here for a second and like, I'll find it, and then you don't have to go through this epileptic seizure of me going through the text. There you go. Okay. So this is a very cool text. We'll go through it relatively quickly, right? Tanya, this is from a Braita, right? Now, right, the first part is less important, but we'll go through it just because. Rabbi Akiva said, this is the famous Rabbi Akiva, I once entered the bathroom after my teacher, Rabbi Yoshua, and I learned 3 things from observing behavior. I learned that one should not defecate while facing east and west, but rather while facing north and south. I learned that one should not uncover himself while standing, but while sitting, in the interest of modesty. And I learned that one should not wipe with his right hand, but with his left hand, right? His student says, Ben Azai, a student of Rabbi Akiva, says to him, like, whoa. Were you so impertinent as a teacher to that extent that you observed this much? Basically, like, did you really follow him all the way to the bathroom and seeing him go to the bathroom? Like, what are you doing? That's not what we do. Like give him the man some privacy, right? Right? Even, right, there's a French saying, right, that says, right, the bathroom is called où le roi va tout seul, where the king goes alone. But like, clearly not. If you're a rabbi and a Jew, although for some people will be like, yeah, of course not, right? If you're a rabbi and a Jew, right, the students follow you. Right? Rabbi Akiva then says to him, right? Says to him, it is Torah and I must learn it. Torah hi ve'alai lelomda. Then there's a similar story. Similarly, we learned in the Braita that now Ben Azai, the student, right, said, once I entered to the bathroom with Rabbi Akiva, it's exactly the same thing, behavior, up and down, wiping with left hand. His students, Rabbi Yehuda, says to him, whoa, again, were you so impertinent to go follow Rabbi Akiva? Right? And Ben Azai says now this regular refrain, same we just seen. No, this is Torah, right? And I must learn it. So exactly the same thing. And we learn here from here, right, that also that you can't just learn it, you have to follow the person. Fine, but that's not, right? This is not what I wanted to show you. It's just part of the sugya, and I hate cutting the sugya sometimes. This time, right, this one, Rav Kahana, different rabbi, entered and lay beneath Rav, his teacher's bed. Right? Rav Kahana has a teacher. His name is Rav. He goes and he hides, or he goes under his bed. He heard Rav chatting and laughing with his wife, right? And seeing into his needs. The Hebrew is right? So like he was playing with her, laughing with her, having sex with her, right? They were like together in the bed, whatever. Right? So the student is under the bed while his master is having sex with his wife in the bed, right? Rav Kahana then says to himself, perhaps, right? The mouth of Abba, my Rav, right? It seems like it's like one who has never eaten cooked dish before. His behavior is lustful. Rav Kahana says, whoa, Rav is macking it. Wow, like he's really enjoying this thing with his wife. Like, whoa, it's as if he's never had a hot dish before, right? As if it was like his first time. Rav then hears him and says, Kahana, are you here? What? Wait, who's talking? Kahana, get out. Leave. This is not behavior that we do. Like, what are you doing under this bed? What are you doing here? Get out. Get out right now. This is me and my wife. This is private time, right? You need to leave. Like, what are you doing here? Rav Kahana responds to him, right? And this is the beauty. Rav Kahana says to him, it is Torah, and I must learn it. Torahi velilmod ani tzarich. There is, right? There is this really. Oh wait, that's another sense. We don't see the way to drop the column. We can't do it. Okay, only remote drivers there. All right. So I'll see it, and if anybody wants it afterwards, they can email me, and I'm happy to send the sheet later, or make it public on Safari, and I'll put the link on. So we can do that after. But back to the text for a second. Thank you for trying, Allison. Back to the text, right? This idea of, right, that how you follow your teacher to the bathroom. How do you go to the bathroom? How do you undress yourself? How do you, right? How do you defecate? How do you have sex with your wife? This is Torah, and I must learn it. That Torah is not just in the text of studying the Parshat Shavua or whatever Shmat is, like we all read one, every Friday or whatever. This is not just about the Midrash or the Torah or the Zohar or the Talmud. Torah lives everywhere, right? There's human behavior. Down to, right, in that sense, Rav can't say to Rav Kahana, no, this is not Torah. Rav, like Rabbi Akiva, like Ben Azai, like Rabbi Yeshua, understand that how we interact in sex, how we interact in intimate moments, how we interact when people don't see us, how do we interact in places that we think are just the otherness of spirituality. Talmud says, no, Torah is there as well. Torah is in the bathroom, Torah is in the bed, Torah is with the rabbi, Torah is with the things. And that's really important as we're about to look at some of these two stories about again, more of their behaviors. Questions, comments? You can raise your hand if you want to go on. If you have a question, you put it in chat. Arik, is that a clap or is that a question? I guess it's a clap. Thank you. Is this practicing these principles in Ofer? Is this, thank you. Yes, I think it is, right, practicing these principles, right? Exactly. This sort of, that this is, right, we have to make sure, right, to use this idea all throughout. And you're quoting from the big book, I believe, right? So yes, right, that we have to sort of look at how we practice all the time. And I think that's really important, especially with these, right? And by the way, these are the MVPs of Talmud, right? You've got Rabbi Akiva, right? Who's one of the most important rabbis, Rabbi Yeshua, his teacher, right? And then you have Ben Azai, right? His student, right? Who went after, if you ever read As a Driven Leaf, right? The whole Pardes thing, those are two of the four rabbis, right? So you've got a lot of really important, Rav Kahana, Rav, a lot of people of the important rabbis. All right. Now, let's find Rabbi Elazar ben Dodia. You will love him. Okay. All right, here we are. Chat. Did these events really happen, or are they just? No, I think they really happened. Can a marriage be holy without sex? Well, sex is a lot of things, Sandra. So yes, it can. And in fact, I'll show you some stuff in a bit, right? Like, but yeah, if we get to it. But yes. Oh no, that's the wrong button. All right. Share screen. Tanya, Menachot. Writer, another writer. Rabbi Natan says, there is no mitzvah, however minor, that is written in the Torah for which there is no reward giving in this world and in the world to come. I do not know how much reward is given. Gurin learned from the following incident concerning the mitzvah of tzitzit, of ritual fringes, right? Right? Everybody knows what the tzitzit is, right? The tzitzit is the ritual fringe that so we wear on the corner of our clothes, or the talitot, right? So it's a tie thing. It's very, very important. It appears in the Bible, right? It's so important that I actually have one tattooed over me, because when I took off my tzitzit, which I wore for the majority of my young life, for those people who don't, I grew up ultra-Orthodox, so I didn't look like this or be like this. If you've seen Shtisel, right, Shtisel, on Netflix, that's my family. There's like a Belgian line that comes in the first season of Shtisel. That's my family. That's my father. That's not reading him, but you know what I mean. Yes, I'll tell you what they are. Do you agree that all forms of behavior exhibited by religious leaders affect Torah values? 100% agree with that. Absolutely, and we can talk about that in a second. And I think that's both fortunate and unfortunate. All right, so this is the tzitzit, right? There was an incident involving a certain man who was diligent about the mitzvah ritual fringes. He always wore tzitzit. He was very, very punctual about this thing. But this man heard about there was a prostitute in one of the cities overseas who took 400 gold coins as her payment. Okay? So he hears about this prostitute who's very expensive. She's a very high-end call girl, like super, super expensive. I mean, we're talking like really a lot of money. What did he do? This guy who was really punctual, but very important about tzitzit, he was really pious, right? He wore tzitzit out. He was very important, super righteous person, quote unquote, right? He heard about this prostitute, right? The Talmud doesn't say us is her thinking, but he does tell us his action. He sent her 400 coins and fixed a time to meet her. He was like, I got to go there. She's not great. I'm going to go there. When his time came, he came and sat at the entrance to her house. Okay. He goes at his appointed time, right? The maidservant, right, of the prostitute entered and said to her, that man who sent you the 400 gold coin came and sat at the entrance, right? He's here, right? Your 2 o'clock is here. She said, let him enter. He entered. She arranged 7 beds for him, 6 of silver and 1 of gold. And between every single one of them, there was a ladder made of silver. And the top bed was the one that was made of gold. She went up and sat naked on the top bed. And he too went up in order to sit naked facing her, right? In the meantime, as he's going up, his 4 ritual fringes came and slapped him on the face. He then dropped down and sat himself on the ground, and she also dropped down and sat him on the ground. And she said to him, I take an oath, right, by the Gapa of Rome, right? They're like, whoa, that I will not allow you to go until you tell me what defect you saw in me. He said to her, I take an oath by the temple service that I have never saw a woman as beautiful as you. But there is one mitzvah that the Lord our God commanded us, and its name is tzitzit. And in a passage where it is commanded, it is written twice, I am the Lord your God. Okay? So let's stop here for a second, right? Because this is a thing, right? So this guy goes, he's about to go up and have sex with her, right? He's about to pay, right, to perform the deed that he paid a lot of money for, that, he was really looking forward to. And as he goes, right, he's about to have sex, he goes there, his tzitzis hit him on the face. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen a tzitzis, but it looks a little bit like a whip. So there's some kink thing here happening, but we'll put that for aside in a second, right? So this tzitzis whips him in the face, and he's like, oh no. And then, right, he was like, oh, I'm a really pious Jew. I can't do this, right? He goes down. She's like, what? I'm the most beautiful. Yes, I did go there. I'm the most beautiful woman. Like, I charge $400 dinars for this. Like, you can't just walk away. You can't, what's wrong? Like, I don't understand, right? You paid for this. We came, what's going on? you want like I won't let you go until you explain to me why you're there, because right, also I think as a side, like, right, if you're positive and all of a sudden like you go there and then he's like, I didn't like it, that can really hurt business, right? That's not good for her. Maybe the fringes hit him in the face when he was taking off. Yeah, either was taking off in general, right? Like, but like clearly, he was being whipped by something. So right, so he goes, right, he sits down and he says, I won't let go, and she says, I won't let go, and he says, like, well, there's this tzitzis thing, and it reminded me, right, that this is the right, tickled, tickled, whatever, hey, whatever tickles your boat. I don't think that's the wrong idiom. I think it's whatever floats your boat or whatever tickles your fancy, but I do that all the time, so choose one. Right, like whatever tickles your boat. But I think that sort of right in that moment, right, and this is why tzitzis is also that important, because tzitzis does represent to us the existence of God in regular day-to-day life. It has traditionally 613 equivalent knots, right, to remind us of the 613 commandments that we're supposed to have, right? So he goes down, he reminds things, and then we can read the rest of the story. But I don't know if there's other questions or comments at this point before we move to the rest of the story. All right. So we continue, right? And he says, right, I am the one who will punish, that's what the God's saying, I'm the one who punished those who transgress my mitzvot, and I am the one who will reward those who fulfill them. Now, said the man, the 4 sets of ritual fringes appear to me as if they were 4 witnesses who will testify against me, right? The tzitzit will be like, we know what you did on the top gold mattress. So, no. She said to him, I will not allow you to go until you tell me, what is your name? What is the name of your city? And what is the name of your teacher? Right? And this is a little bit in the answer to one of the people of the chat, that how our actions do reflect on Torah and other Torah scholars, right? That, right, his actions now will have to reflect on where he's from, who's his teacher, right? What study hall in which you study Torah, right? His behavior, right, as we all do, right? We turn like, oh, that's the entire person, or they represent a whole body of things. Is he a Jew? Oh no, he's a Jew. He's a yeah. Gentiles don't tend to wear tzitzis. He's a Jew. So he wrote the information and placed it in her hand. She arose. She divided all her property. The sex worker? No, she's a Gentile. Well, hold on for that. He wrote the information and placed it in her hand. She arose, right? She got up and she divided all her property, giving 1/3 to a bribe to the government, 1/3 to the poor, and took 1/3 with her as her position. In addition to those beds of gold and silver, to these sheets of gold and silver, right? So she said, I'm going to close down my business. I'm going to take all the money from my business. 1/3 I'm giving to charity. 1/3 I'm going to give to the government, and 1/3 I'm going to keep with me. And she came to the study hall of Rabbi Chia, and she said to him, my teacher, instruct your students concerning me and have them make me a convert. So she wants to convert to Judaism, of course, right? Rabbi Chia then said to her, my daughter, perhaps you set your sight on one of my students, and that is why you want to convert. She took the note that the student had given her from her hand and gave it to the Rabbi Chia. Then he said to her, go, right? Take possessions of your purchase. Those beds that she had arranged for him is in a prohibited fashion. She now can arrange for him in a permitted fashion. And the Gemara completes its point about the reward of mitzvot and the point of how this story illustrates the concept. This is the reward given to him in this world. With regards to the world to come, Gemara says, I do not know how much reward he will be given. Now, you would think this is an interesting, just sort of like this sort of weird, interesting story. But there's a different story in a different tractate that sounds awful lot like our guy. But here, it's actually a lot more condemned. And this time, he has a name. The Gemara asks, and is it correct that one who repents from the sin of forbidding sexual intercourse does not die? But isn't it taught in a Braita? It's a different story. they said about Rabbi Eliezer ben Dodia, but that's his name, Rabbi Eliezer ben Dodia, that he was so promiscuous that he did not leave one prostitute in the world with whom he did not engage in sexual intercourse. In today's world, we call this a sex addiction. He had sex with prostitutes all over. Not right. The Talmud says he knew all of them, right? Lo heniach zona achat ba'olam shelo ba'aleh. Not even one that he did not have sex with. Once he heard there was a prostitute in one of the cities overseas who would take a purse of full dinars as her payment. He took a purse of full dinars and went and crossed 7 rivers, sounds familiar, to reach her, right? But this time, when they were engaged in the matters to which they were accustomed, i.e. when they were having sex, right? Thank you, ArtScroll, euphemism for intercourse. Thank you. I think we got that. She passed wind. She farted and said, just as this past wind will never return to its place, so too Elazar ben Dodia will not be accepted in repentance. I'll stop here on this particular story. It goes on, but I'll stop here for a second. Let me look at the thing, right? Why are there so many prostitutes in Talmud, and why do they seem to have so much autonomy and agency than wives and other women? I'll talk about it in a second. 7 rivers, 7 beds. That's right. 7 typological numbers. So I'll get to that question in a second. But what is important, I want to sort of start about these 2 stories because I think that the stories about the same person, the same rabbi, in fact, right? And what is interesting, and we always have to remember, especially with the Talmud is an edited document. They could have taken these stories out. In fact, there was one rabbi who tried to take these stories out. That would be Rabbi Judah the Patriarch. That's why all these stories are braitas. If you know what a braita is material that was part of the Mishnaic endeavor, but Rabbi Judah the Patriarch, Rabbi Judah Nasi, decided to not include them. The Talmud is like, I don't care. Right? It's the same period, so he puts them together. He just calls it a Braita instead of a Mishnah, right? But Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't want them there, so for him it was important to take them out. What is important here, right? And to see, because in both of them and the rest of this story, which I won't go much into because I want to show you a few more things, is that it allows them to see their inequity, to see their promiscuity, or see their sin, if you will, right? And when I say, actually, I shouldn't say sin. Usually when we talk about chet, right, at Tshuva Center in general, I describe it as miss the mark, right, which is really the Hebrew term for chet. Sin is more of a Christian understanding of it, which sort of we've kind of inherited from the translation of the Bibles. But chet means to miss the mark, like in archery. And this chet, this miss the mark, right, is a chance for them to make tshuva. It's a chance for them to repent. And in both stories, they use that moment to understand, we'll call it rock bottom, but it's not just rock bottom, it's just rock bottom for that particular element. Now, why are there so many prostitutes and things? So there's a few different sort of like answers to this, but most importantly is that the Talmud has a lot of affinity to the sex workers because they performed a function. In fact, the most famous prostitute, the most famous sex worker in Talmud has a name. If you ever read Ruth Calderon's book, she's in Ruth Calderon's book. Her name is Charuta. Her name is Liberty or Libertina. And she's very, very famous. And there's a few stories about her. There is right when Hannah, right, when she goes to Shiloh, to the tabernacle to pray, the woman who really sort of like taught us how to pray in silent, Hannah, she is there, and they think she's a prostitute. They're all around, and not just wives and mothers as well, but they have a whole almost protected class because of the function that they have in Talmud. But that's a whole different thing. Yes. I always love the story. The rabbis seemingly secretly admired by others that their story to engage. It's not just it's not just missing to well, yeah. It's not just that they that he it is exaggerated, but it represents an issue that they're dealing with, right? We don't make laws for things that don't exist, right? We don't talk about things that don't happen, right? There's no law that says you have to breathe, right? But they are also saying, like, right, at least now you can't breathe on other people, which is the pandemic thing. But I would say, right, that sort of it's important whenever we see a law, whenever we see an idea, it's because it's something that's happening and they want to have an opinion about it. Other comments or questions? All right, let me show you some other cool stuff. All right, so we have till 9:20, right? We have about 12 minutes-ish, right?
Yes.
Left? Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Cool. All right. Let me share my screen. Let me find things. So he gets into heaven, by the way, don't worry, at the end. I'll show you this. We'll go to Ima Shalom. Sorry, let me find it. Yeah. Sorry. All right. Let's look at the whole text. I'll just run through it. So Rava said, Rav Idi explained the matter to me. The verse says, we're talking about a verse, say you of the righteous who is good, and they shall be eat the fruit of their actions. This is from Isaiah. And this verse is difficult, it says. As is there a righteous person who is good, and is there a righteous person who is not good, right? Sort of like, right? How can it be like if you say there's a good righteous person, does that imply that there's a not good righteous person? Right? Right? So rather, this verse should be understood as follows. One who is good both towards heaven and towards people is a good and righteous person. One who is good towards heaven but bad towards people, that is a righteous person who is not good. So there are two kinds of righteous people, right? Which is very interesting. But that's not why we're here. Rabbi continues on one similar note. It is written, woe to the evil, wicked one, for the work of his hands shall be done to him. And is there a wicked man who is evil and a wicked one that there is not evil? Rather, one who is evil towards heaven and one evil towards people is an evil, wicked person. And one who is evil towards heaven and not evil towards people is a wicked person who is not evil. Right? And this whole idea of, right, I want you to, this whole idea of like the function of evil and wicked and righteous and good and bad, that it's not this just one thing. But again, that's not what we are here for. I'm going to jump a little bit and say, right? Yeah. But how do I realize the meaning of the following verse that deals with sinners? Therefore, they shall eat of the fruit of their own way and be filled with their own devices. This verse indicates that the penalty for sin goes beyond its principle, and the wicked receive additional punishments. The Gemara answers this by applying to a sin that produces profits, i.e., a case where there are practical consequences to one's sin. For example, if others learn to act in a similar manner, one's actions have profits with regards to punishment as well. Conversely, a sin that does not produce profits does not have profits as punishment either. The Gemara further teaches, the Holy One, blessed is He, links a good thought to an action, as it is stated, and they that feared the Lord spoke with one another, and the Lord listened and heard, and a book of remembrance was written before him for them that fear the Lord and that think upon his name. Okay? Now, what is the meaning of the phrase, and that think upon his name? Rav Asi said, even if a person intended to perform a mitzvah, but due to circumstances beyond his control did not perform, the verse described to him as credit as if he performed the mitzvah. And is he among those who think upon his name, but Holy One, blessed is He, does not link an evil thought to an action, as it is stated, if I had regarded iniquity in my heart, the Lord would not fear. But how do I realize the meaning of this verse? Behold, I will bring upon these people evil, even the fruit of their thoughts, right? In the case of an evil thought that produces evil, it leads to an action. The Holy One, blessed is He, links this action, and one is punished for the thoughts as well. If it is a thought that does not produce fruit, the Holy One, blessed is He, does not link it to the action. The Gemara then asks, but with regard to which it is written, so I may take a house of Israel in their own hearts, which indicates that one can be punished for thoughts alone. To what is this reverse? Rav Acha Bar Yaakov said, what is written in regards to idol worship, the Master says idol worship is very severe, as anyone who denies it is like one who admits the truth of the entire Torah, right? And then we continue, and I want to show you the end of this. Abahu says in the name of Rabbi Chana, it is preferable for a person to transgress in secret and not desecrate the name of heaven in public, befaresia. As it is stated, as for you, house of Israel, so says the Lord, go serve everyone in his idols, even because you will not be hearkened to me, but my sacred name you shall not profane. Rabbi Eli, the elder, says, if a person sees his evil inclination is overwhelming him, he should go to a place where he is not known and wear black clothes, and he should cover himself in simple black garments, and he should do it in his heart desire, as his heart desires, but he should not desecrate the name of heaven in public. So this whole thing, sorry, I read a little bit too much, but the whole thing, right, is there to show us, right? Yes, I'll send a link to the short seed, right? That all these teachings try to show us, right, that there is this sort of whole approach to how we think, how we sin, what does that produce, how do we try and understand it, and in the end, right, if you miss it, at the end, this is the Talmudic Vegas. If you're going to have to sin, dude, wear black, cover your head, go somewhere else, do your business, and then go home. Don't do it, right? Don't do it there. Now, it's not this permission like to have this sort of kind of like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But for us in this Talmudic endeavor, as we look at this and say to ourselves, whoa, there must be a space that we are able to integrate our full self. No person is without sin. Not the rabbis, not Rabbi Akiva, not us, not me, no one. We all have those things that we have to admit, the things that we have to contend with, right? And again, for some it's huge, right? Sex addictions, like we see Rabbi Elazar ben Doria. For some it's gambling. For some it's shopping. For some it's whatever it is. But the Talmud, if we really want to look at this, when it really goes down to it, it says, I have to address this. I can't just pretend or just be good and do good. I have to allow them to make sure, right, that every daylight has a sunset. And now what? How do I learn from it? What is the connection between how I think about something and what I do? What happens if I'm compelled? So this is not permission, but this is really what Jung will later call shadow work. For us to be able to integrate our dark self and our light self. For us to understand this sort of the human condition compels us to really be able to learn from our mistakes. Tshuva, right? As we define it, right? And that's why sort of my center is called the Tshuva Center. Tshuva means three things. Repent, we all know, right? The performative Tshuva Yom Kippur. But it also means to respond, latet Tshuva. And it also means to return. Those three together, repent, response, and return, are the ways that we constantly have to find our way back. And there's this concept in mystical Judaism that tells us that when God created the world, before he created humanity, he created tshuva. Why? So that nobody can say, I will not sin. So that nobody could say like, oh, man is without sin. He's there to tell us that if you get off the road, there's a way back on. And that's important. And the more we study Talmud, there's a whole bunch of other sources on this sheet. to show us how we do things over and over again. And we all fail, but the question is, it only is a failure if we don't learn anything from it. And that's really, really important for me. Comment, isn't it awfully convenient that you get credit for even thinking about doing a good deed, but you do not get punished for thinking about doing a bad, about being a bad deed? Well, I think it's, I think that as the text says, it's a very interesting thing about, right? So like a good deed, right, perhaps is a lot more harder to think, because I think a lot of us think about bad deeds a lot more than we're willing to admit. And then once that seed is there, it kind of germinates. And we have to think about, right, how we train the mind for those things, because training the mind is very, very difficult, right? A lot of us, I think, right, ask ourselves constantly, like, why am I not invited, right? Why am I, you forgive my French, why am I shit? Why am I not good? Why nobody wants to hear me? Why am I so fat? Why am I so thin? Why am I so tall? Why am I so poor, right? And the brain will find answers to that. But if you try and ask yourself, right, and you should try it, right? And some people on this call have tried it, right, and can talk about it. But if you try and ask yourself, like, how am I great? How am I amazing? How am I smart? How am I capable? How am I good, right? The brain will start answering those as well. Try that for a week. You'll see how you start sort of ruminating in a different way.
We missed Sandra's question, right?
Oh, sorry, Sandra's. What's Sandra's question?
Or comment.
Oh, I've always loved this story, that one?
Oh, so this is like, you're not responsible for the first thought, but you are for the second and any actions thereafter.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, much agreed with that. Absolutely. I once heard a teaching about a Christian concept that someone who lusts after a woman in his heart has committed adultery. The rabbi said, if you already committed adultery just by looking at her lustfully and will incur punishment, why not the real thing? Yes, although it's funny because there's versions of this in our tradition as well. That sort of like, in fact, there's a rabbi called the Sfat Emet that talks about sometimes if you keep Shabbat, you've actually broken Shabbat. And if you've broken Shabbat, you can actually keep Shabbat. That the thought in our head immediately changes how we think about things, right? That sometimes, right, so the thought of doing something transgressive sometimes is worse than doing something transgressive, and vice versa. Absolutely. And it appears in our text, in our traditions as well. So we have 1 minute, right? I know it was a lot. So this is really a taste, right? Like I said, I could talk about this for hours. If you're more interested, right, the Tshuva Center, tshuvacenter.com is open. We will send, Allison, right, we can send people who will hear the link to the sheet and stuff.